Welcome to another edition of Black on Black Conversations about us, with us, for the world. I am your host, Julian Michael, and I am excited about my guest today. This is another person I went to college with who is way more successful than I am.
I wouldn't go that far.
This is a good brother right here. He is an assistant professor at Harvard University. He's the author of a fantastic book entitled The Privileged Poor: How Elite Colleges Are Failing Disadvantaged Minorities. Please welcome Dr. Anthony Jack. Thank you, brother.
Oh man, it's good to see your face. It's good to hear your voice.
Likewise. We go way back. I remember actually my first impression of you was through the Christian Fellowship at Amherst, because we were writing, they made us write letters. I'm a couple years ahead, and we were writing letters to the incoming students, and I drew your name, and they were just like, yeah, he's this kid from Miami, just write a little whatever. So in my mind, just like thinking about the kind of people who were at the Christian Fellowship, I just assumed you were going to be this just like blonde hair, just like surfer kid from somewhere. And then you show up and blew my damn mind.
Yeah, I'm not blonde, I'm not blue-eyed, I damn sure don't surf.
I love it. Tell people how what life was like for you growing up.
It's wild. I've been reflecting on that more and more, probably because I've been quarantining at home by myself for the last 4 months. And, you kind of like feel that, I kind of feel what birds feel with that like call to go south, or however they want to frame it, how we're taught in school, or like bears to hibernate, that kind of like innate thing to want to go back to Miami, especially doing right now, right? You want to be with family. You want to see people. You don't want to miss out on time. You also want to make sure you get some fried chicken and potato salad and some barbecue, all that kind of stuff like that. But it was interesting because my neighborhood now is like a half-remembered dream, right? And it's kind of like a hazy place because half the neighborhood looks like me and what it was when I grew up, but now the other half looks like me now, educated and credentialed, or at least, like with professional degrees, right? And so like the gentrification is like, it's like that pendulum swing between being halfway done and halfway to go because of the Great Recession in 2008. And that slowly picked up, and then now we're in this again. But growing up in Miami, my mom was a security guard at a middle school. She actually helped to desegregate that middle school. So when you look at her middle school yearbooks, you actually see like it's white on white on white. Like it's white people wearing white clothes, and it's like the black and white. So it's like almost like they bleached it out. Like it almost looks weird to see the kind of yearbooks now. And people think like, segregation is like, very, very far off, and it's not. But she's been working at that middle school since she was a couple months pregnant with me. So like she literally started when she started there a few months. So I'm 35, I'll be 36 this year. She's been there for 36 years. And then my brother's a janitor, and I grew up in my grandmother's house with mostly, my mom, my brother, my sister, my grandmother, and my cousin. But every Sunday, not even every Sunday, it was like in the stereotypical, but also very real Big Mama's house type thing. I never had that, but people would always stop by.
Yeah.
We always had cousins in the area. We did cook on Sundays and eat early. But for Goombay, which is the Bahamian festival, everybody would park at my house. My friends knew they were welcome. My cousin lived down the street, so we would always be at each other's house. And so, there was a lot going on. I was fortunate. There was two things on either side of being fortunate and being disadvantaged. I was fortunate to be in Head Start. So I ended up going to the school across the tracks. So I didn't go to a local school. I went to the predominantly white school, literally on the other side of McDonald Street. And I was also fortunate in that I was able to stay in that school, and that put me on a different track. But you literally saw the difference. And I didn't really understand the differences. I just saw that the closer I got to school, the bigger the houses got. But now I understand, like, literally, like the median cost of the median income, the median cost of homes, whatever statistic you look at on the census tract, you literally could see just like the gap just going huge across one street.
Yeah. Wow.
And you would see things, yeah, you knew all the crackheads, you knew if people were fighting. If you there was one night, and I wrote about this in the New York Times. I was walking home, and this crackhead had stole some people's drugs, or drug money. And so they beat him up and broke a cinder block over his head while we were walking to the movies in Cocoa Walk. And so we saw what was happening. So we turned. So the only thing we hear is like, "Who that's down there?" And so me and my friends, me, I don't like to run. Run. they walk for 40 years, right? So we turn around and we bust at, like, we run to behind the houses. The only thing you hear is dual pipes go, pick up the guys, and then they go on. And so you saw things. You saw the good and the bad. You struggled. You went to McDonald's when they had the 29-cent hamburgers on Wednesdays and the 39-cent cheeseburgers on Sundays. You made ends meet however you could. But the second thing that I was very fortunate is I grew up on the park. My childhood, you cannot talk about my childhood without talking about Varick Park, because I went there for my summer camps. And this is when, like, cities actually invested in summer programming and different things like that. It was really, really amazing to be able to go to summer camp, the park had a pool, but I also had a ceramics teacher who was so much more than that, right? She, I think back now, like, how much trouble was kept at bay because my day didn't end to 5:30, because we rushed from school past home to go to the park so that we can do ceramics, the chess sets, the clowns, the everything. That was part of my childhood. So you saw the bad, you saw the consequences of segregation, you saw the consequences of joblessness and drugs, but I also grew up at a time where people still invested in parks, even though it was still unequal because white folks got all the money, and they hoarded it in my neighborhood and in the city. But the Varick Park was still something that was very, very special.
Wow. So one of the things that I will forever remember about you is that you ostensibly came to Amherst to play football.
Yeah.
And that didn't last super long.
No. Oh, no.
And then you went on and you got like 7 or 8 majors. I actually don't know how many majors you picked. I think.
Well, I'm gonna tell you why I stopped playing football. I'll never forget. I made this decision. So I'm from Miami. My last game in high school football, that's when Under Armour was just coming out, and so everybody was wearing Under Armour because I think my last game was like 70 degrees.
Wow.
And so we were all cold because we're so used to, like, when you take off your helmet, the steam comes up and all that kind of stuff. We were used to playing in closer to 80-degree weather. And so even going down the 70s, high 60s, that was like when you put sweaters. My last game at Amherst was 17 degrees.
That was
if you think I'm gonna be wearing capri tights, which is basically what a football uniform is, if you think I'm going to be wearing that and falling on the ground and getting hit, I was like, you know what? I didn't come to college to play football. I came to college to get a degree. And when I realized that football was slowing me down from what I could possibly be doing, that confirmed what I had chosen that day when we left Williams College. And so, I started focusing on my work even more. I had, the thing is, so I was religion, women's and gender studies,
Mm-hmm.
and pre-med at Amherst. But more than degrees I had more jobs than degrees.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I had to support myself, but then also send money back home, as many first gen lower income students, have to do. It's an immigrant experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you are that person who's leaving home to go to a new place with new rules and new cultures at for a shot at a better life. But before that better life comes into picture, you also have to send the remittances back home. And so I would have to send money home to keep the lights on, to get medicine in the house, to pay the mortgage and things like that. And so one semester I had 6 jobs, and I got called into the dean's office. And they were like, you've already exhausted your federal work study, and you're working more hours than you're allotted. Because if we only get 20, well, y'all should have told me that before. I'm like, but it's hurricane season. I need to be able to send money home. Like, what do you want me to do? And so that's when I was actually still working there. I think you were still at Amherst because I was a diversity intern. I think it was my first year as a diversity intern in the admissions office. And I was like, what do you want me to do? I can't, like, there are certain hours that I can't cut. And I'm not giving up any jobs. So y'all need to figure this out. But that was actually my best semester. I was probably the most robotic, but it was my best academic semester when I was working the 6 jobs. And even though it was hurricane season and things like that, and it was Hurricane Katrina and Wilma.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we focus a lot on New Orleans, as we should. But I think the structures in New Orleans made Katrina and a worse storm. But in Miami, they got hit by Katrina and Wilma, and other places. There was just like so much insecurity that we were trying to figure out how to even manage. And I was just like, look, I need to be able to go to Western Union or MoneyGram, whatever that was in Walmart. Like, I need to be able to send money home. So what do you want me to do? Let alone paying for books. And I would say ordering out, but I don't think I started ordering out until my senior year. I was too broke to order out much. Yeah, I was just like, if it's free, I'm going to eat it. But if I got to order it out, I don't think I did that much.
That's just a key for any administrator in the future who might listen to this program. Make sure you got Papa John's on speed dial, something. You put some work in. You working with college kids, high school kids. Make sure you got them covered with the meal. You'll get 155% out of it.
In the real, with the work that I do, I have consulted with a number of colleges and universities.
Mm-hmm.
To get students, we have to start meeting students where they are, not where we think or say they should be. And the way in which food plays a huge role into that, not just as a carrot to entice people to come to events, but making sure that also we address the ways in which food insecurity undercuts their college experiences. Right. So what are the ways not only can we make sure that we think about food not as just kind of like a gateway drug to get you into services,
Mm-hmm.
but also making sure that we pay attention to who doesn't have consistent access to it, and things like that. And so yeah, you're absolutely right. And because I will expand that not only to Papa John's or Domino's or wings over Amherst that we used to eat,
stuff too,
but
though.
also gift cards to grocery stores.
Yeah.
That's huge. And I hope more and more people think critically about the gift cards.
Tell me a little bit more about the privileged poor. And I preface that by saying that I have lived this experience. So your book is in a lot of ways a story of my own life and struggle, having also been first gen, very low income, having been given access to private schools by virtue of just being a little bit more intelligent or focused or whatever, or lucky, whatever it is, and ended up at an elite college. And I think even more so sort of after having graduated, then having my eyes open to some of the ways in which I still had a lot of gaps to fill that some of my peers didn't necessarily.
Yeah, so the privileged poor, and this is also me, like, never letting Amherst leave me, or really never leaving Amherst, because Amherst allowed me to be free. I embraced a humanistic style of learning that embraces the humanities, embrace a liberal arts education, and it felt me to be free with words. It felt me to be free in my thinking and associations. And so privileged poor, like, it's a term that kind of sits with you, like jumbo shrimp, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how can someone, it forces you to say, how can someone be privileged and poor? But the privileged poor, it's a term I came up for a group of students who were low income, but got access to boarding day and preparatory high schools before coming to college.
Mm-hmm.
Because what my research uncovered was elite colleges are diversifying at unprecedented rates, right? They are doubling the number of students who receive Pell Grants, students who are first in their families, students whose families make less than $40,000 a year. The numbers are like growing compared to what it was 10 or 15 years ago. What they're not saying is where they're getting their lower income students from. Because my research shows that on average, 50% of lower income Black students and 1/3 of lower income Latinx students at schools like Amherst and Harvard and Princeton are actually the alumni of Exeter, Hockaday, Thatcher, Andover, St. Paul's, schools that cost more than most colleges in the country,
Mm-hmm.
schools that have faculty that are 50% PhD, and high schools that have study abroad programs. And so I said colleges were hedging their bets. They were getting their new diversity from old sources, right? They already get their rich kids from those places. And they were like, well, if you can handle that for high school, why don't you come over here for college as well? Come with your classmates. Yeah, we're going to take 20 of y'all a year. It's just that now I went from being 20 all white men to 20 all white men and women to now being 14 white men and women, and then 6 everybody else, right? And so that's what's uncovered, and it was an admission secret that everyone knew. It was an admissions fact that everybody knew. Mm-hmm. But outside of the admission circles, I think most people were just like, did not think about the pipeline. But the larger question is, why do poor students have to go to private schools to get into an elite college? Right, that's the largest social inequality question. And I compare and contrast their experiences to the group I call the doubly disadvantaged. Lower income students who go to local, typically distressed public high schools, to really show that the gap in America is not between a good public and a bad public, suburban public and an inner city public, even though that is fraught with racism, right? It's oftentimes the difference between our public schools and our privates. Because students went from having the average class size being 35 students in my, the double disadvantage, to some of my students who went to these private schools didn't have a class with more than 7 people their entire time in high school, right? And thinking about being taught by a PhD who a PhD who's already went through their bachelor's degree, their master's degree, they got a terminal degree, and they're teaching at a boarding school, as compared to a teacher who's in TFA, right, fresh out, new, like has a lot of energy but no experience doing the job. And so just like thinking about that kind of drastic inequality, I just show what happens when lower income students get to school and how colleges privilege, right? And that's the real thing, right? It's not just about what money you have, it's what experience that have you had that only money can buy.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. I think I'm gonna let people read the book to really get into that. But we're just given where we are at this moment, some of the things that are coming directly from the administration, Department of Education, and just kind of this cultural moment that we find ourselves in. I think the quality of education that young people are receiving has never been more urgent and crucial, and also more at stake, particularly in public schools, particularly in underfunded public schools. And so we really risk, without a significant amount of intervention, losing a generation of students among those who are already disadvantaged. This pandemic has almost made them triply disadvantaged. When you think about, when you start talking about inequities in terms of technology and quiet.
Oh God, yes.
And all
access to places so much.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is, education policy has always needs to be greater than what happens in schools.
Hmm.
Um, I I did an episode of United Shades of America with M. Kamau Bell in Cleveland, and in Cleveland, this one of the local schools actually has dedicated an entire classroom, took out all the desks, took out all the tables, and put in washing machines and
Wow.
dryers,
Wow.
because the level of economic concentrated disadvantage, concentrated poverty around the school, students were coming to school in more and more their clothes and themselves in more and more ragged shapes and more and more ragged conditions.
Mm-hmm.
They were also trying to hoard food during breakfast and lunch to take home because there was no third meal, right? And so they're taking on additional responsibility, some schools, of providing a safety net for these families so that their kids can learn. Because it's not just about giving a student a laptop. It's not about giving students, a quick program or even a summer program. It's about how do we make sure that these structural inequalities like poverty and segregation and joblessness is not completely putting students on a separate track towards upward mobility. And I don't mean upward mobility as in like, can we all be in the top 1%? I mean going from the bottom 10 to the bottom 20. Like, can you go from can you imagine making $30,000 a year? Can you imagine making 45 or 60? There are no, the fall of unions or unionized jobs, right? Like you cannot. I was thinking back to people talk about old shows lately, and thinking about how did the Winslows afford the house that they lived in?
Come on now.
Right? How did when we think about the TV shows that we used to watch and realize that some of the professions that afforded you a solid middle class life can now make you one or two paychecks from poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID didn't present new social ills, it exacerbated old ones.
100%.
Because now more and more people who thought they were comfortable realized just how close to the edge they actually were. They didn't realize that the ground was like crumbling under their feet until now. Yeah. And so when I think about what schools and school policy, this current administration doesn't give a damn about what happens in schools, let alone all the other forces that shape just how unequal education is in America, right? And so we're not even talking about the curriculum yet. We're talking about straight up and down what resources are given to schools. And it is a law, a lost generation has been said many times for different reasons, but we are at a time right now where it's not just a questioning of facts, but people are questioning the value of education in all of its forms. Mm-hmm. And that is scary. It's interesting that we're waiting for scientists to save us, but we're not willing to invest in what makes scientists scientists.
Right.
Right. We're not willing to invest in Pell Grants. We're not willing to invest in public education at both the K-12 and the and in higher education. We're letting for-profit colleges multiply like rabbits and really devastate people's financial futures because you don't graduate, right? You don't graduate. You can't take anything for transfer. It's a money pit. You just throw your money in, and the people who do graduate don't always see the returns because it's so expensive.
Yeah. What does Blackness mean to you?
Jesus. That's a question that I struggle with sometimes because, and I wonder if you ever thought about it like this, because we come from similar backgrounds. Sometimes thinking about race was a luxury, because when you're trying to figure out where your next meal is coming from or what kind of problem you're going to try to keep at bay or you're trying to like see if your dad would actually care to return a phone call, knowing that you're asking for lunch money for the next week, and he says that maybe he'll think about it, right? It was that when I think about my positionality, I think so much of it as a poor black man
Mm.
first, and that influences so much. But blackness for me is not limited to one thing, right? And it's not the stereotypes about black people, and it's not the falseness about our strength, right? It's kind of like what everything is in between those false realities, right? So when I read N.K. Jemisin and I read like narrative fiction by these amazing writers, you think about Toni Morris, you think about James Baldwin, you think about um, Langston Hughes, you think about all these people and creating a narrative around brilliance and struggle and forgiveness and drive, right? You have all of those things, but it's also about being blackness as the reflection upon America's. It's like as Toni Morrison, like in whiteness and literary imagination, right? Did you need the Africanness to reflect back the whiteness of the characters in these books? And so I often think about that. But how do we always not think about blackness or black people in relation to others? How do we think about ourselves as individuals
Mm.
who occupy this world? And that's something that I'm still grappling with, because I think about social class and how it shapes my experience so much. From one, only seeing black people because of where I lived,
Mhm.
and then coming to the realization that social class differences among black people, but it's also coming to terms with actually discovering what blackness and black people, what blackness is, and what black people are beyond what was ingrained in me for so long, going to the schools that I went to. And so I'm loving the discovery of voice,
Yeah.
of of the of the history that gets swept under the table, the inventions and the it's people were, when all this was happening, people went and flocked to like the help of all movies, right? And not saying that I want them to go watch a movie. I want you to go read a book, but not something like Hidden Figures, right? Or not something that actually told the story of triumph, of the true nature of America, but that one that can highlight also black brilliance in very honest ways. They were absolutely brilliant. They literally took a man to the moon. But what are the ways in which the hyperbole on both sides makes us lose sight of the everyday brilliance of blackness?
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm still struggling with and dealing with and thinking about.
Yeah. No, that sense of learning and unlearning to to
Mm-hmm.
to find what and who you really are, not what you've been told you should be, even by yourself, not what
Mm-hmm.
your experience suggests that you should be, but what you actually want to be within the context of your own skin. What does America mean to you?
That's a question I have actually never been asked. America is a set of contradictions,
Hmm.
opposing forces that place black people, brown people, women, queer folks on the front lines of two opposing forces, and we ended up being the ones that get beat up, but still have to produce and be. Yeah, yeah. America is a place that is in a constant state of contradiction from its founding to where it sees itself going in the future. And people want to call it the great social experiment, the democratic example of the world, whatever. But no, it's like just a set of contradictions from the very beginning to the end. how do we even begin to think about that? Yeah, that's now I've been this past year, between 75 school visits and interviews and stuff. That's the first time I was ever asked the question, what does America mean to me? And the only thing I can think about is the contradictions, the amendments that we have to make to a the amendments that we have to make to get people to think that there were humans who can think, who can write, who can feel, who can aid in society over and over again, whether it's a Black person, whether it's brown folk, whether it's a woman, like literally fighting for basic rights that you believe certain people just have by their birthright if they are white and male. Yeah, it's a set of contradictions to me.
Yeah. What does God mean to you?
Oh, now that is a journey. That is a journey, because probably you probably got my name because my application essay to Amherst, or one of the supplemental ones, was how I worked in the sound ministry at a church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was, for 4 years, I was there every Sunday, every wedding, every funeral I had to work. But then over time, I caught myself thinking of the old saying. I forgot, it's either old Jewish proverb or old Muslim proverb. I wish I would have met Christ before I met the Christians, because I've seen the church help as much as it hurt. And so for me, God is something that's deeply personal, and not necessarily within institutions, but in the everyday, in the small moments of every day. I kind of felt closer to something spiritual walking along the Charles River and seeing the geese land perfectly into the river than I did sometimes at a church service. And so it's more about that personal relationship. And so religion and God, to me, became more about ethics and morality, mm-hmm. and trying to find my understanding of what is right and wrong, and being guided by different scriptures, not just one. Because as a religion major, I did Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yeah, the only one we didn't have was Hinduism, and so I would have taken that as well. And so just thinking about how literally I even constructed my undergrad career about studying morality, whether that was through the parables of Jesus, Islamic ethics, courses like that helped me grapple with what is right and wrong in the world.
Yeah. What about family? What does that mean to you?
Family is the first thing that comes to mind is family are people. Family is people, right? But I think more deeply, it's the connections between people. I never grew up in a place where, we don't say step anything in my family. We don't say half anything in my family. Like, if that's your cousin, that's your cousin. That's your brother, that's your brother. That's your, that has. It's all about the relationships and how invested we are in each other. It's funny, I was talking to my therapist, and she was just like, what's your attachment style? And so we were talking about all kind of things like that. And when we talked about family, she was like, yeah, I can probably write the script for how you think about, your family. But it really is about people and the relationships that sustain and push you. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not all easy, it's not all positive, but it's those relationships, the people in the relationships, and how they push you to be more authentically you. Yeah. Because family can be your anchor in the sense that they ground you in tough times, but families can also be your anchor in the sense that they can weigh you down. Mm-hmm. And being able to understand and see which ones are different, which moment is which, and knowing that you are strong enough to act on that. Act on your read and trust that you're making the right read, you are a better person as an individual. And and in my case, because I had been the crutch for my family for a number of different in a number of different ways, I I have a better read of myself now. I mentor differently because I bring students in, my friends from graduate school, right? You know, like when we talk, it's not the superficial conversations. It's not the, you know, the pat on the back and just like when you're walking by. No, it's like real deep conversations about love and loss and aspirations for the future, like real things. And so, yeah, family means people to me, but especially the relations between them.
Yeah. Well, would people be surprised to learn about you?
That I knit. um, I get a lot of looks. As a matter of fact, when I was traveling around the country, you know, this flight attendant, I got on a plane, and the flight attendant was like looking at me, kind of like, and so I gave him, you know, I gave him my jacket, and she was like, so I went and sat down, and she kept looking at me. I was like, oh shit, don't tell me this lady racist. I don't have to deal with a racist flight attendant. And so I just started knitting, and she tapped the other lady. She's like, oh, our friend is back in 1B. She had recognized me, but she couldn't place it. But when you see a 6'5" black man, you know, who's big as I am, knitting a baby blanket that's like pinks and blues and
Yep.
yellows and whites, she was just like, she placed me immediately. So I think one of the biggest shocking things is that I started to knit about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was sustaining me while I was on the road for the book, because it was really just, it was something that grounded me.
Yeah, that's awesome. How can people support you?
Um, wow, that's a great question. You know, one of the reasons why I stayed at Harvard after getting my PhD at the Ed School is because there's a pillar on which our school is founded called usable knowledge. And I try my best to write in such a way and engage the public in such a way that when people grapple with my work, there's something tangible they can leave with it. So I would very much encourage people to read the book, whether, you know, go to your public library or your local bookstore or wherever you get your books. Read with it and grapple with it, because especially if you know someone in college or a high school person who's about to go, there very much is a roadmap-esque nature to learning about inequality in college. There's a way in which I constructed the book that in talking about inequality in college, I also give a roadmap for those who are about to go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it is a narratives of 109 students, but for a high school senior to know what office hours are before they arrive on campus, but not only know what they are, but why they should use them and how they can go about doing it, and the benefits, right, of going to office hours.
Mm-hmm.
That chapter literally has changed the way in which many schools have done faculty orientation, right? So there are very practical things that people in college can take from it. So definitely read the work however you need to. And the other thing is hold your college's feet to the fire.
Yeah.
When it comes to supporting first-gen, lower-income college students who don't have familiar support, let's make sure our students who are striving to be their best selves are not going hungry during spring breaks and other recesses, or going homeless because of the closing of dorms. But let's see if we can actually hold our schools' feet to the fire. If they're going to be accepting our family members, our friends, the children of our friends, the children of our family members, if they're going to accept them, make sure to take care of them.
I love it. Tony, you're a gentleman and a scholar. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope that we can see each other in person sometime soon, that the world doesn't before then. And keep fighting the good fight, my brother.
All right, good seeing you.